something I try not to do and fail at miserably on a regular basis, as regular esteemed audience members can attest to, is I try to avoid politics. One, because they move so fast. We talk about it this week. By the time people listen to this, just because an episode goes live doesn't mean people listen to it right away. People are still discovering previous episodes as we're recording this one. So I try to avoid politics, one, because I want people to have a respite from what's going on, the bombardment of politics everywhere else. And two, just because the scandals move so fast that if we're talking about this, by the time they're listening to it, there's probably, this is 5 or 6 scandals ago. But we have seen the rise of a racist demagogue in the United States. It's been a popular theme that if you're wondering what would you have done during the rise of Nazism, you're doing it right now with the state of the Republican Party. So that's about as political as I could possibly get. I'll just put that out there. Did that inform your shaping of this novel? Obviously, it's 5 years. There's 5 years to write, and then another 4 years before we're here at launch, right? Do I have the timeline on that right?
Something like that.
So it would have been relatively earlier for the writing it, but has that informed the edits, the revisions, I assume that has to inform this a little bit, just the parallels between the history we're living in right now and the parallels of a 1938 Germany. Or am I way wildly off base? It happens all the time.
Well, even before 2016, I saw parallels. And going back to my comment previously about growing up, I was just constantly asked questions rooted in ignorance. How could this have happened? I don't understand it. All Germans are evil. All Jewish people are victims. That kind of narrative. And I think it's easy. It makes you feel better drawing a line and separating yourself from that time period because it was so horrific. And point your finger and say, no, that could never happen. There's a reason for that. It's so far out. It's so long ago. It could just never happen. And growing up, I grew up with that mentality. And it's, if you just looked around, even before recent years, you could see things bubbling up that had disturbing parallels to early 1930s Germany. I think, as I was doing research for the book, I didn't just confine it to 1938. I looked, all the way back, throughout the rise of Nazism. And one fascinating bit of research I found was when Adolf Hitler, some of his campaigning speeches were caught on video. And it was fascinating. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was not that. Most of 98% of his campaign promises were rebuilding Germany because, as you know, they were economically devastated, which really helped lead to the rise of Hitler. So he said, I'm going to rebuild things. We've had enough. We're the victims. All this, this narrative, and just people were so desperate. At the very end, I forgot who came on, but it wasn't Hitler. It was somebody else. And at the very end, it was a footnote about Jewish people and about how, we've had enough. We will no longer be bullied by the Jewish people. And it was fascinating to see it framed in 1930s, when people really, the early 1930s, when people were really starving and ripe for that kind of language. So I think that if you want to make parallels between now and World War II, I don't know if it's fair to look at 1938 and above. I think it would be telling to look at the early 30s, and especially those campaign speeches where it was a little unnerving.